My friends, wish me luck. With this content, I'm venturing into the territory of the only group of people more cancerous and toxic than metal fans, and that is gamers. The only group of people that have the potential to be bigger, punishing, nitpicky, pedantic buttholes than metal fans is gamers. That's it. Maybe like Philadelphia Eagles fans, maybe possibly worse than metal fans, but other than that, it's got to be gamers. And so I figured, you know what? Why not just jump right into the lion's mouth and tackle one of the most beloved franchises in all of gaming, which is Final Fantasy. So I will give you my rankings, which I'm sure are going to upset people. I will give you my rankings of all of the Final Fantasy games that I have played, which is not quite all of them, but it is pretty close to them. Starting with
breaking news.
I have new merch. I've got this new one designed by my good friend Michael Shantz. It says, "Hell yeah, brother."
Hell yeah, brother.
And the Listen to New Metal shirt, as well as all my other designs. And you can check all of those out at the link in the description of this video. I'm going to group Final Fantasy 1, 2, and 3 together. The original games for the NES, or as true weeaboos call it, the Famicom. You know, if you've ever played these, they're quite primitive. Respect for what they did. You know, they established so many conventions that we still use today in JRPGs. JRPG, for those, if you're watching this, you're a turbo nerd. But you know, JRPG, Japanese role-playing game. I think you could say Final Fantasy 1 is still the template for Japanese role-playing games, more or less, like Final Fantasy and Dragon Warrior, but I think especially Final Fantasy 1. However, is it good? Or should I say, would you want to play it now? I don't think you would. You would not want to play it now. You know, respect for what it did. Final Fantasy 1. It's not a bad game necessarily, but you wouldn't necessarily want to play it now. Final Fantasy 2 is an interesting one. This is where they came up with the job system, right? I forget if 2 or 3 was the job system. I don't know, whatever. It doesn't matter. Both of them are, I would say, arguably worse than Final Fantasy 1. I think it's Final Fantasy 2 where the enemies scale to your level. It's very broken. Like, respect for what they were trying to do, but very broken. Final Fantasy 3, not something you would want to play now. Again, respect. I mean, I think Yoshitaka Amano, that's the character designer, right? Yeah, the job system was absolutely super influential, but you wouldn't want to play these games now. There's a reason why Final Fantasy 2 and 3 didn't come out in the US. Very flawed games, super experimental. I really wanted to like them, but I just kind of can't. It's not games you would want to play now. There are fan translations out, and they did remakes for DS, and I think there's like the new, like the Pixel remaster ones. I would say I would not choose to play those games, but as other people are saying in the chat here, 4 is where it gets real. That's correct. Final Fantasy 4, although in the US, what we got as Final Fantasy 2 for the Super Nintendo was actually Final Fantasy 4. In Japan, they put out Final Fantasy 2 and 3, and the people at Nintendo decided Americans weren't ready for 2 and 3. So we got Final Fantasy 4 Japan as Final Fantasy 2 US, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, I would say this is the first one in the series where you would actually want to play it now. It's a pretty simple game. It's straightforward. And it's pretty short also. It's like very linear, but you know, it's a really fun game. Very fun, kind of thing. You know, you could beat it in a couple days if you wanted to. As long as you're not looking for a lot of depth, I think it's still really good. The characters and the story still hold up. You know, it's about Cecil, the Dark Paladin, trying to reject his past and levels up to be a paladin, blah, blah, blah. I think it still holds up. I think it's a really good game. It's old school. So, you know, you got to sort of be ready for that. If you're expecting it to be, you know, fucking Dark Souls or something, it's not going to be. But I think it's a damn good game. The first one in the series where I would say, like, yes, if you like JRPGs, you should absolutely play this game. I would put it on the A tier. Solid game. So next up is a game that I absolutely love, which is Final Fantasy VI, or as we know in America, Final Fantasy III, same thing. This was like the first JRPG that I played where I was like, holy fuck. I played both of the Final Fantasies when they came out, Final Fantasy I and Final Fantasy II when they came out, and I thought they were like cool, but this is the one where I was like, holy shit. This was like the most cinematic game ever made, for sure, up until that point. I think it's the best JRPG of the 16-bit generation. Other people will say Chrono Trigger. I do think Chrono Trigger is a good game. Oh yeah, I forgot about 5. That's right. I'll go back to that. I think Final Fantasy 3/6 is the best one of that generation, personally. I mean, one thing that's really cool is you can recruit, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and then there's another character in here, Gogo, that's not on here. You can recruit 9 or 10 different characters in your party. There's like side quests. The art direction is amazing. Yeah, the opera scene is one of the coolest scenes in the entire franchise. The plot is good. Like it gets kind of non-linear. There's this crazy thing in the middle of the game where they like split the world in half, and like just everything about it is amazing. It felt like they had been building towards this for a long time, and this is when like JRPGs really reached like mastery, in my opinion. So my personal opinion, I know, you know, some people may disagree with me, but I would put this one on the S tier. I think it's fucking great. Now, I skipped 5 by mistake, but that's a very underrated game. This is another one that didn't come out in the US originally, and I think that's a real shame, because this is one of my favorites in the franchise. This is the first one that had sort of the job system as we know it, where it basically works the same way as we think of job systems now. So you pick a job, and then once you've leveled up, you learn those abilities and blah, blah, blah. And this one's from 94, I think. And like this pixel art still looks great, right? Like look at this octopus. It still looks awesome. The game's like pretty linear, but I think the writing is actually still really good. It's very deep. There's a lot of like side quests and optional stuff. It's not quite as good as Final Fantasy VI, but it's damn good. If you like JRPGs and somehow you've never played 5, I would definitely suggest playing it. Don't play the PS1 version of it though, because the loading time is horrible. What you want to do is play the fan translation of the Super Famicom one, or the Game Boy Advance port that came out in 2003 or something like that. That's the one to play. I would put it on the A tier, right up there with Final Fantasy 4/2. Not quite as good as 6, but still a damn good game. So that brings us to the end of the 16-bit generation of Final Fantasies. This is just my opinion. I know this is going to ruffle a lot of feathers, but the next game is the one that most people, you know, have, I would say, the most emotional attachment to, which is Final Fantasy VII for PS1. A lot of people have very fond memories of this game. A lot of people, I think, maybe remember it being a little bit better than it actually is. It was certainly very innovative, an industry-changing game for sure. I would kind of compare it to Final Fantasy I in a lot of ways, in the sense of, yeah, that it's foundational but flawed. I think that's a good way to put it. Final Fantasy I was also a very important, groundbreaking game that made a lot of people change the way that they thought about games and created a lot of things that were really important to the genre. But if you try to play Final Fantasy VII now, it's kind of rough. The translation, for one, is horrible. Like, some of it is like barely even like readable. Like, it's totally broken. The graphics are terrible. Obviously, you know, we understand that it's PS1, data technology and stuff. They got the world right. The characters are cool. Like, there's a lot of things about it that are great, but the execution, if we're being honest, it's not quite there. So for that reason, I know a lot of people are going to be very mad at me for saying this, but I would put it on the A tier. It's not really an S tier game. As much as people want to say that it is, I just don't think it is. Yeah, Final Fantasy VII is like Mario 64, major transition, and it holds a lot of nostalgia, but not great. That's what I think. I'm Japanese, so I played the original, and the dialogue and everything was more cohesive than what you guys probably got. Yeah, the translation, the English translation is very very rough. I totally believe that if you played the original in Japanese, it would perhaps be an S tier game. But this is just my opinion. I would say the next game that we'll talk about is Final Fantasy Tactics. As an autist, my wife always laughs at me because she says the type of games I play are just like these little characters on a screen with a bunch of numbers and stuff. And that is correct. And Final Fantasy Tactics was not the first game to do this. I would say Tactics Ogre was probably the very first one, made by the same people as Final Fantasy Tactics. But this is the game that for sure really perfected the formula of tactical RPGs. I think it's a fantastic game that still holds up today. There's a couple parts a little bit rough, like I forget the name of the boss where it's just Ramza. It's like a one-on-one fight like halfway through the game that's like super unbalanced and you kind of have to cheese it or like it's basically unwinnable. And there's the guy with the lightning sword, I forget his name, that's like totally overpowered. So there's some like balance issues and stuff, but it's a damn good game. Yeah, Y-Graph, that's what it is. That's right. Really made a lot of people get into this genre, but I'm going to put it on the... No, I'll put it on the S tier. I'll put it on the S tier. However, controversial opinion. This is a very controversial opinion, but I'm going to say it. I think the best game in this series, in the Tactics series, is Final Fantasy Advanced Tactics 2 for DS. It's basically everything about tactics, but with, I mean, look at this fucking art. This pixel art is fucking insane. Just jaw-dropping. The systems are better, the music, like everything about this game, the writing is better for one, the translation is actually good. Tactics Advance and Tactics Advance 2. A lot of people dislike these games for some reason. I don't know why. Maybe because they're like not as like dark and grim as Tactics. I don't know. But I think Final Fantasy Tactics Advance and Advance 2, in my opinion, are even better than the original Tactics. So I'm going to put the Advanced Tactics Advance games on the S tier. I think they're incredible. Absolutely love them. Love them. Oh, it's because they're on Nintendo? Maybe so. I think they're beautiful, wonderful games that are still worth playing. Next, how about Final Fantasy VIII? I actually just played this recently. A couple months ago, I went back and played Final Fantasy VIII. It's an interesting game. I remember when it came out, people hated it because they said that he was emo. The main character is Squall. You know, he has this sort of like cool guy attitude. He's like kind of like surly and like, get out of my room, mom. I'm moping. And he has that kind of look of this like edgy emo sort of look. So a lot of people didn't like the game for that reason. The other thing is it has the battle system is really interesting, called the draw system, which a lot of people didn't like, and it's totally broken. If you understand how to manipulate the draw system, you can totally break the game in like a couple hours. The thing is, the enemies level with you. So the trick is that you just don't kill any of the enemies, so they stay at level 1, and then you basically abuse the other systems to level your characters up to like be insanely powerful while all the enemies stay at level 1. And if you do that, you'll like totally break the game. But I think the world building is actually really cool. Kind of reminds me of Final Fantasy X in some ways. It feels really unique. It's this sort of like, it's not quite steampunk, but it kind of is. I think that Final Fantasy VIII is a very flawed game. It's totally broken, but it's better than people think. Yeah, the story and the world are really cool. I agree with that. I think it's a good game. Definitely flawed, but I think it's cool. It pains me to say it. I'm going to put it on the B tier, even though I actually think it... I like Final Fantasy VIII, but it's so flawed and broken in so many ways that I got to put it on the B tier. As much as I sort of want it to be higher, I think B is probably fair. The cutscenes were really cool too. And the summons. The summons take so long. That's really irritating. Anyhow, next up, we have Final Fantasy IX. At the time, people didn't like this game. They felt like it was sort of, I don't know, like too old school or something, or I don't know. It wasn't what people were expecting. Final Fantasy IX is basically a return to the old school. It's almost like if you made Final Fantasy 2 or 4, but with PS1 technology. It's sort of like a return to the old school. And it's really lighthearted. Yeah, kind, wholesome, not too edgy. Exactly. And I think that's why some people didn't like it, because they wanted it to be like grim and dark and edgy. And it's not that at all. It's just a really fun, wholesome is the best word for it. It's an old school game, but it's really polished. The artwork is beautiful. The music is great. The story is great. Like, I don't want to spoil it for anyone who hasn't played it, but there's one part that's like genuinely really sad. There is a part that gets pretty grim later on. Yeah. I don't want to spoil it, but there's a part about halfway through the game when you find out something about one of the main characters that like actually made me really sad. It was like, oh shit, that's what's happening. Oh my God. I would definitely get it. If you like the way this looks and you like old school JRPGs, I think it's really good, and it still holds up today. You know, it's still an old school game, but I would put it up there with the very best of the games. Which brings us to Final Fantasy X, which was the first one on PlayStation 2. It horrifies me. This game is 23 years old now. Because I don't want time to go that fast. But that's reality. This game is 23 years old. If you guys remember Eulogy Recordings, the label that put out like the Warriors and Evergreen Terrace and stuff like that, the first time I played this game was when I went to go stay with Ian from Eulogy in Florida. He had a PlayStation 2 and he had this game. That's where I played it. Yeah, it has Blitzball. I think 10 is a fucking great game. Wait, no, I'm sorry. This is 10-2. What have I done? I feel like people maybe don't appreciate this game as much as they should, because it's a really like foundational game in the series. Like, it's the first one on PS2. Like, I think it's some of the best storytelling. It doesn't appeal to the snobs. It is very linear. That's true. And there's not a lot of like side quests and depth and that's true. The gameplay is maybe a little bit old school, but as far as like the characters and the writing and the storytelling, I would say is maybe some of the best in the franchise. I think it's a great game. The graphics are a little bit rough, of course, but I think it's great. I really liked it. I think it's an awesome game. I have very fond memories of it. Like, the world building is really cool. I like the setting. I think it's an awesome game. Call me a Final Fantasy stan. Maybe you think I'm putting too many games on the S tier, but I think 10 is an S tier game. I think it's fantastic. Now, I'll tell you one that people do not like. This is going to be maybe the most controversial choice I have in this whole video. Final Fantasy X-2, which this is a game that I feel like everybody other than me hates. I love this game. I think it's awesome. It was really an unexpected game. The way the game works is you play these three girls, Yuna and Riku from the first game, as well as Pain, which is a new character. It sort of has like a job system where you can get different, they call them dress spheres. You put on different costumes to change your job. It's kind of a silly game in a lot of ways. It doesn't take itself too seriously, although there are a lot of parts of the game that are actually like really dark. But like, this is the vibe. It's like Charlie's Angels, but Final Fantasy, basically. This is definitely the vibe. I think it's really fun. I like it a lot. It's very non-linear also. It has a lot of side quests, and you can sort of, choose your own way about the game, and it's really funny. Plus, I'm a Riku stan. I think it's an underrated game. A lot of people hate it. But for me, my personal opinion, it's one of my absolute favorite games in the franchise. A lot of people are not going to like me for putting it on the S tier, but that's where it goes for me. That's where I would put it. I want Final Fantasy X-2 too. That's what I want. The next one, I did not play 11. What 11 was like was the first MMO, right? Yeah, that was the first MMO, which I did not play, so I can't comment on that. The next one in the series is Final Fantasy XII, which is kind of an interesting game. Final Fantasy XII was kind of like trying to give you the feel of an MMO, but not an MMO. They were trying to do some experimental things with it. It had like, the combat is cool with like the gambits and stuff. I thought that was cool. For me personally, I thought the writing was kind of, I don't know, too hard to understand. Exactly. 12 was when the hot streak ended. It was still good, but a little bit, I don't know, the writing was a little bit too like dry and political for me. I didn't really latch on to any of the characters. The artwork is cool. I liked the systems, but it just got a little bit too like overweight for me with all the political intrigue that I couldn't follow. I did like it, but to me, kind of a flawed game in my opinion. I would put it, for me personally, on the same tier as 8. Certainly good, but I don't know. It's not the first one that I would choose. I would rather play 9, 10, 2, 5 over 12 personally. I didn't play 13 and I didn't play 14. Let's talk about 15. 15 is the last mainline game that I played. Well, I guess it is the last mainline game, so of course it's the last one I played. A very interesting game. This is the one that took like 10 years to make. This had been in development for literally like a decade before it finally came out. And it's kind of like almost impossible for this game to like live up to expectations, right? Because after being in development for that long, how could it possibly be as good as what people wanted it to be? I think it's a beautiful game. At the time, it was one of the best looking games ever made, in my opinion. I really liked the vibe and the writing. So it's basically, this is the vibe of the game here. You drive around taking road trips with the boys. My favorite part of the game is all the cooking and stuff. So there's a lot of silly stuff in the game. Like you can do all this like cooking, collect different recipes and cook, have a cookout with the other boys and take photos and stuff. 15 is 10-2 for the ladies. That's right. A lot of people didn't like this one because they thought it was like, gay or something, or, it's just like a boy band. That's why I liked it, because I thought it was kind of silly. You can drive around and collect all the previous game's scores to listen to. I liked that. I thought that was really cool. The problem is the world itself. It's like a huge open world game, but the world itself is kind of empty. There's really not a lot of reason to like explore very much. And sometimes like the random encounters are sort of annoying. It felt like even with 10 years of development, it still felt kind of unfinished to me, which is too bad because I feel like it had a ton of potential. Like it had the same kind of vibe as 10-2, which I loved. It just didn't quite come together for me. As much as I wanted to love the game, I do like it, but I think for me, it's going to be a B tier. Certainly not the worst, but not the best. And it just makes me wonder what it could have been if they would have finished it. Okay, well, that does it for the Final Fantasy tier list. There's a couple other games I could include here, like Crisis Core and Dissidia. We've managed to shotgun through, something like 15, 16 games here, so I will leave it at that for now. I can already predict the frothy nerd rage in the comments. Hopefully you don't hate my gaming opinions even more than you hate my metal opinions, but there we have it. The definitive Final Fantasy tier list. Yes, we're doing weeb shit now. That's us. We're doing weeb shit.